Welcome back to The Explainer. So I'm absolutely pumped to get into today's topic because it hits on this completely visceral experience that honestly we all share. Okay, picture this. It's 3 a.m. The world is totally silent. You are right on the edge of finally drifting off to sleep, and suddenly, completely out of nowhere, your brain decides to play a high-definition, blockbuster-quality replay of a moment you would really rather forget.
Like, why do you specifically remember that one Tuesday back in 2014 when you tried to crack a joke in a crowded elevator? You know the moment. The joke lands like an absolute lead balloon. You literally feel your soul just leave your body. And instantly, you're playing 4D mental chess, agonizing over every single word you said, analyzing every microscopic facial expression from the people around you, wondering if those three random strangers still think you're weird. Why on earth this has happened to us?
And that brings us to this incredible quote from our source material. The exact texture of the silence. I mean, wow, it's just wild, right? Your brain can perfectly recall the exact suffocating texture of the silence that followed a social blunder a whole decade ago, but you probably can't even remember what you had for lunch on Tuesday. So today in this explainer, we're going to decode the architecture of the cringe and figure out exactly why your brain flat out refuses to let you forget your most embarrassing moments. All right, moving to section 1, the psychology, specifically the spotlight effect and cognitive load.
So to really grasp the mechanics here, we got to talk about the spotlight effect. Basically, when a super awkward moment hits, our brain just completely flips into this intense performance mode. During these social interactions, it's like we aren't even just living the moment anymore. We literally feel like we're watching ourselves from outside our own bodies. And this triggers a massive, overwhelming spike in cognitive load. Your brain is just frantically spinning its wheels, desperately trying to read the emotional temperature of the room in real time. Because think about it. You're trying to just breeze through a normal conversation while simultaneously playing this incredibly high-stakes game of, wait, am I smiling too much or did I just make it weird? The stress levels just absolutely skyrocket. The quote-unquote cost of connection just feels insanely high. And all of that simultaneous performing and analyzing, it creates this intense exhaustion, especially if you're the kind of person who really values genuine authenticity over just, pouring on the social lubricant.
Which brings us to section 2, the evolution, or why we're wired for survival.
So why on earth is your brain doing all this heavy lifting over a bad joke? Well, evolutionary psychologists point out that our ancestors lived in what's called a high contingency environment. Basically, actions had instant, literal life or death consequences. If your tribe rejected you, you didn't survive, period. End of story. Compare that to today's awkward elevator ride. A bad joke just feels like death, but obviously it isn't. The catch is, your brain hasn't quite downloaded the software update for the modern world. It still treats a minor social slip or a bad vibe as a literal physical storm it has to survive.
And thanks to that ancient history, we've developed what's known as a negativity bias. Basically, it's a threat detection system that never ever fully powers down. It is hardwired for defensive pessimism. Like, your brain might cross its fingers for the best, but deep down, it deeply expects the worst. It's constantly scanning the horizon for sudden rug pulls to your social standing. So when that embarrassing moment inevitably happens, your brain doesn't just brush it off. No way. It archives it with these bright red flashing warning lights.
All right, section 3, the mechanics, how this actually gets etched in memory.
Okay, so we get the evolutionary why, right? But what about the mechanical how? Well, the big term here is deeper encoding. Cognitive psychologists have shown that when information takes a ton of mental effort or carries heavy emotional weight to process, it becomes way more permanently integrated into our memory. Since the emotional centers of our brains have this incredibly high plasticity, these really stressful, super effortful moments, they aren't just tossed into a dusty filing cabinet. They're literally etched right into your neural pathways. It's actually a super fascinating cycle. Step 1, the social slip happens. Step 2, you use your mechanical intuition to try and frantically fix the error right then and there. Our source uses this fantastic analogy. It's like instantly flipping a bicycle upside down to aggressively fix a greasy, derailed chain. You are putting in a massive amount of effort. And then comes step 3, rumination. By replaying that memory at 3 a.m., you aren't just remembering it, you're actually practicing it. You're relentlessly practicing the painful memory so it literally never fades.
Let's move to section 4, the modern context, where we find ourselves trapped by documentation.
We really got to look at how drastically the world has changed, too. Back in the 1980s, we lived in a purely analog world. Autobiographical memory was naturally fluid. Your brain could just sort of edit things, keep the good stuff, and let the cringe naturally fade away. Then you have the bridge generation in the 2000s, who learned this very specific survival tactic. The less people know about you, the safer you are. But jump to the 2020s, we exist in this era of permanent documentation. Now, the fear isn't just that we will remember our mistakes. The real anxiety is fearing their immortality, knowing the internet literally never forgets.
Now for Section 5, Social Anxiety and the Safe Harbor.
So what exactly is the fallout of all that fear? Well, for a lot of people, it creates this intense low stimulation preference. People aren't staying home just because they're boring. They stay home because home is literally the only working charger. It's the one single place where you have absolute, total control over the lighting, the noise, the whole vibe. But there's a serious danger here. Social anxiety can totally turn that safe harbor into a cage. We become so terrified of another one of those etched memories that we end up creating like 17 different exit strategies just for a completely low-stakes coffee date. We're just constantly building backup plans for mistakes that haven't even happened yet.
Finally, Section 6, the reframe, or as I love to call it, the lighthouse.
Look, I know this all sounds super heavy, but right here is where we can completely flip the script. We can reframe this whole thing from a source of shame into this beautiful, profound marker of empathy. There's this stunning metaphor from the source text that says, "A lighthouse doesn't shine because it's perfect. It shines because it remembers the darkness." And you know what? That is exactly what your brain is doing. Your brain is a lighthouse. Those 3 a.m. replays, they aren't trying to torture you. They're actually your brain's deeply empathetic way of trying to turn mere survival into insight and pain into compassion.
By etching these intensely awkward, painful moments into your mind, you've essentially memorized the language of pain. You are so incredibly fluent in it now that you can spot it in somebody else from a mile away. You become, essentially, aggressively empathetic. And if there's one thing you take away from this explainer today, let it be this: you are absolutely not broken. You're this walking paradox who's been through enough to develop a deeply nuanced understanding of what it actually means to be human. Your brain is just holding on to these memories to protect the softness you didn't always get to keep in a really harsh world. Which brings us right to our final thought. The next time some random memory from a decade ago elbows its way into your brain and makes you physically wince in the dark, instead of feeling all that shame, maybe ask yourself, is that 3 a.m. memory actually just poetry in motion? Can you look at that tiny little rebellion of your nervous system as a beautiful testament to the fact that you have survived every single storm you've ever faced? You are still here, you're still navigating, so maybe, just maybe, it isn't cringe at all. Maybe it is simply poetry in motion. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.